Good morning, friends. Hello and welcome to my next Livestreaminar as we celebrate Memorial Day and honor our fallen here in America, those who fell in service of our country over the course of its 240-year plus history. If you're tuned in, why don't you go ahead and give me a quick check-in? Let me know that you can see the stream and where you're tuning in from. It looks like everything is good on my end, and I'm assuming that you can hear me okay too. I'll go live here in just a second. It is an absolutely beautiful morning here in Virginia, and I am delighted to be doing this with you before I take the week away from live streaming for a little while. It seems like I've been online a lot lately. Good morning to you. Before I get started, a handful of things. One, thank you for all the kindly birthday wishes for our new teenager. We're all adjusting to this new world nicely so far, I will say, and I'm happy to be doing so. A little bit about Memorial Day before I get started too. For us here in America, it started as Decoration Day post-Civil War, and has materialized into a celebration or a commemoration of those who've fallen the last Monday in May. Eduardo, buenos dias, primo. It's good to see you. This also marks the week, the anniversary of the miracle of deliverance, as Churchill put it, the evacuation of the Allied armies from Dunkirk. Hello, Karen. It's good to see you again. Thank you for being here this morning. So what I'm going to be doing today is mostly focused on American military records, but hopefully there's a lot of useful information that can come from any American or any military service record from any country, really, for any of our ancestor searches. There is both a wealth of information to share and a wealth of information to be potentially gleaned about our ancestors. So I've broken this up really into a two-part series. Good morning, Nancy. How are you? Today I'm going to focus mostly on pre-1900 military ancestors because it's kind of a different thing researching our Revolutionary War and Civil War ancestors than it is for World War I and World War II. And it's a kind of a natural divide. So on my next live streaminar on June 6th, which happens to be the anniversary of D-Day, I will be focusing on the 20th century records, and we'll talk about that. So today I'm going to really try to be helpful with sort of summarizing some of the highlights of researching Civil War, Revolutionary War ancestors, and where we can find these records. So I'm going to go ahead and just start with a really useful bit of history. How far back do our armed services go? And how do we go looking for records? It helps a whole lot to know things like the fact that the Marine Corps was originally part of the Navy way back in 1775 and was established as its own branch of the service. Oh, good morning, Cousin Eileen. I'm glad to have you here too. So as you think about where you might be looking for records for American military ancestors, certainly it helps to know that. As I said, today I'm going to focus mostly on American service records and all that, but certainly in the UK there's a lot of similarity. I'll also have this slide for next time too. And with all of my live streaminars, I do have them archived here at YouTube. But today I'm focusing on those pre-1900 records, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Our military records really are genealogical treasures. They are packed with information in a lot of cases, not only about our ancestor, but where they lived, when they were born, where they were born, the job they were doing at the time they joined the service. And there's also potentially information about spouses, or next of kin to be notified, and parents as well. So if we get lucky and hit a home run with one of those service records, it's really something special. Um, so where do we find those records? Well, here in the States, that would be at our National Archives in DC. And having been to the National Archives to research my Civil War ancestors, I can tell you that it is an amazing experience if you live close enough to be able to do so, to actually hold your ancestors' record in your hand, the paper that they signed in their own hand. They have also a much harder to put your mitts on, but they also have Revolutionary War records too. Now, with the Revolutionary War, things are not quite so readily available because in this new nation, records were not kept the same way. But there are certainly types of records that one can find, and among the many things that are readily available to us are histories not only of our ancestors' personal service, but of the units that they served in, and in particular in the Civil War. A lot of this stuff is readily available online. The National Park Service, for instance, given all of the interest in the Civil War and visiting Civil War battlefields, has a soldiers and sailors database online that you can search, and there are lots of unit histories available too. When you visit a Revolutionary War site, someplace like Lexington or Concord or Cowpens in South Carolina, generally speaking, it's a little harder to put your hands on individual records. But you can certainly, if you knew that your ancestor was at one of those places, you can learn a lot about the general movements for the day. There's also, when it comes to Revolutionary War history, one of the things that we depend on are the applications made by our more recent ancestors to join either the Sons of the American Revolution or the Daughters of the American Revolution, those lineage societies, because basically you had to fill out a proven connection to a Revolutionary War ancestor, which, let's face it, that was a little easier to do 100 years ago than it would be now. So with all of these various different things available to us, we have quite a treasure trove of potential clues and evidence about our ancestors. But we also have the ability to use a whole new kind of evidence. DNA evidence helps us an enormous amount. And as we consider our military ancestors, one of the most important things to know is how the limitations of DNA matching can help us with our Civil War and Revolutionary War heritage, and War of 1812 heritage too. Now, with the Civil War, most of us who have ancestors who were in some way in service, the National Archives does, by the way, also have records for the Confederate States as well. Most of our Civil War ancestors would have been a great-grandparent to 4 times great-grandparent to the living now. I will tell you, one of the most valuable things at the National Archives isn't just the service record, but for those who survived the war, here's a hot tip from a former water engineer. All of these soldiers at some point were exposed to badly biologically contaminated water. And all of my ancestors who survived the war have long invalid pensions that came directly from their bout with intestinal ailments for the rest of their lives. I had a great-great-grandfather who was summoned to Washington in the 1910s to see an army physician about his condition because they wanted to verify it, and he said, "I can't even leave my house, let alone ride the train from Connecticut to Washington." So those invalid pensions are also there at the National Archives. So as you go through those records, you find the names of people who are closer to you, their children and their grandchildren who they may have lived with. And DNA matching certainly reaches 5 to 7 generations back. That gets us to our great-great-grandparents, to our 4 times great-grandparents pretty easily, with luck. as long as we've had enough families survive. So that's one important thing. Now, with the Revolutionary War, that extra 85 years sometimes stretches back beyond that normal range of what DNA matching can tell us. But again, there are those lineages, and this goes for Canadian and British ancestors who obviously were on the other side of that battle. There are or that war. There were records for loyalists as well as British, as those serving the crown in the army or navy. And here, both for loyalists and for Revolutionary War descendants, those lineages on file at the Sons and Daughters of the American Revolution are at the National Archives, and those paper-proven trails allow us to shorten the genetic distance to somebody who shares that ancestry. So here's a pathway of someone who's listed 5 generations, perhaps, to their Revolutionary War ancestor. Well, for instance, my great-grandmother, my grandmother's mother, I found her application to the DAR filed in 1913, and there was the paper trail of the next 6 generations back to our Revolutionary War ancestor. So it gives you a valuable tool as you're looking through your DNA matches and trying to find where your historical military ancestors are. It's a really powerful and valuable bit of clues that help bridge that gap. So when it comes to military records, I do have a very hot tip for this week. For Memorial Day, many of the online services, but in particular Fold 3, which is the portal to all of these American military records, Fold 3 is going to be free access, unlimited access through Monday night. There are access, they do have access to records from other countries as well. Fold 3 is not a cheap subscription, so when they offer something like this, it is well worth looking into. I believe that in the UK and Ireland, also this weekend, Find My Past is also making their military record collection available, and I do believe that's free. You'll have to check. This is also a great weekend to, if you do know your military ancestor story, to share it online. They deserve to be remembered, those who gave all in service of their country and their ideals and their neighbors and their countrymen. And if you don't have a military ancestor of your own, it certainly is lovely to pay a visit to a local cemetery, especially on a beautiful spring day like we're having in Virginia. I have 3 cemeteries to choose from, and no shortage of the military veterans that were cherished by their family and are visited this weekend by their descendants. So, with that being said, I would love to take a couple minutes to share one of my own personal stories about finding a military ancestor. My grandmother, of course, was the keeper of our family history, and her mother's line, the Culver line, had a Civil War ancestor that nobody seemed to know anything about, and I didn't even really know how to spell his name. And a few years ago, when I was searching for him online and looking to see if I could push Graham's family tree back on this main primary branch, half as far as all the other branches went, I sat there doing a little Google searching for a little while, and I got on Ancestry, and he has an unusual first name. His name is Artis, Aretas. And when I finally interpreted my 9-year-old chicken scratch on the Sons of the American Revolution family lineage sheet that my grandmother had me fill out, I typed it into the search bar, and there is his picture staring back at me. Artis Culver served in the 16th Connecticut. He signed up in the summer of 1862, and I knew nothing of any of it. And as I started exploring, I realized that he had been on the field at a critical part in the Battle of Antietam, on the bloodiest day when the most Americans have fallen in battle in a single day, barely an hour from me here in Virginia. And I've been to Antietam many times. I'm glad that I was not there under the circumstances that Artis Culver was, for he and his unit had been in the Army for barely a month and had one drill with their military rifles, which were ancient Belgian rifles that had been issued to them in a hurry before they were packed off on a train and sent to be in reserve at the Battle of Antietam. He wound up a couple years later imprisoned at the notorious POW camp at Andersonville. And he got home from that and did not survive his ill treatment there. It was through finding him online and starting to do the DNA matching and all of that, and realizing that there were other descendants of Artis Culver, none of whom seemed to know anything of his story. We found that he was buried in my dad's hometown of Bristol, Connecticut, and we found that he was buried under a long neglected broken stone. A young cousin that I met in this search, my cousin Mike, was very bothered by that and felt like, it would be great if we could do something about this situation and more properly honor his sacrifice for his country. So early last year, as I was writing the book, we put together a quick one-page application to the VA to get him a proper headstone. And lo and behold, the VA does those things, and they gave us the option to get one of the lovely rounded limestone that you see at all of the national battlefields near the Civil War historic sites. And so on Veterans Day last November, we rendezvoused in Bristol to dedicate that and to honor his service and more properly pay homage to the sacrifice that he made. So Artis Culver kept me company throughout the book. For those of you who have the book, you know that he's there at many places along the way. He was one of my chorus of companions through this journey of researching my own family history. But he also got a song, and it feels only fitting on this Memorial Day weekend to share it with you. My name is Artis Culver. It's summer of '62. I traded in my papers for a uniform in blue. I took Abe Lincoln's bounty and Union swore to save. What I have seen since that day haunts me to my grave. We were farmers, merchants, clockmakers, and I knew all their names. Some escaping trouble, still others seeking fame. Proud we marched down Main Street till Bristol rang her bells, but none would know our destiny, to glory or to hell. Escape the dreams. Oh, don't you hear their screams? Oh, I will kill no more. Oh, let them fight their civil war. Train to Maryland with but a single drill, to Antietam's killing fields upon that cornstalk hill. We faced their fiercest legion in withering hail of lead, and terror ran while rebel yells echoed in our head. We dug graves for many days, watched my lifeless eyes, marched with rifles at our backs and hands that fought at our side. Little Mac called it victory, but for failure we were blamed. And if I might survive this war, I vow to clear my name. Oh, I can't escape the dreams. Oh, don't you hear their screams? Oh, and I will kill no more. Oh, let them fight their civil war. surrounded the siege at Plymouth Town. Our white rag of surrender stopped the shells from raining down. To Andersonville through gates of hell, its deadline we had crossed, when they paroled my skin and bones. My soul had long been lost. I am Artis Culver, my breath is fading fast. Tell my wife and children I love them to the last. The curse I leave this world with before the fighting's done is those that vote to start the wars, be those that face the guns. Oh, I can't escape the dreams. Oh, don't you hear this scream? Oh, and I will kill no more. Let them fight their civil war. Artis Culver from Treasures in My Chest. If you have any questions, now would be a great time. I meant to say that pop them in the chat room while I was playing the song, and I forgot to do that. That's what happens when you have amateur hour happening here on YouTube Live. But if you have any questions about researching your pre-1900 ancestors, this would be a great time. I will say that I'm planning on devoting an entire Livestreaminar, the next one on D-Day, on the anniversary of D-Day, same time, 11 a.m. here, and I'll be talking about World War I, World War II, and Korea, which there are a lot of really interesting and useful bits of information that I have to share with you then, and it deserved its own webinar. One of my Canadian relatives is one of my my features in that, and he served in World War I, and so I'm looking forward to sharing that. On Monday, on my Facebook page, I will share the song that we wrote for Memorial Day that's on Something Worth Standing For in honor of the fallen, and it's called Wind Whispers Your Name. I hope you'll drop by and see that, hear that. If you would like to share this with your friends and family and people that you think might be interested in learning more what we were talking about this morning, please do feel free to not only subscribe to my YouTube channel, but go ahead and pass it around. I'm going to keep doing these for a while. I've got a few tidbits from the book that turn out to be pretty useful and valuable tips, and learn from my mistakes kind of thing. For those of you who are spending this weekend here in the States, I hope that your Memorial Day weekend is a lovely weekend. And if you have ancestors who gave all, I appreciate their sacrifice, and I'm glad that we're able to spend a little time talking about that this morning. I hope that you enjoy the holiday weekend in safety, and preferably in beautiful weather too. I am taking the week off from live streaming. My next live stream is going to be on Facebook. I'm going to do one at a Europe-friendly time for my cousins across the Atlantic, as well as late in the day enough to be enjoyed by folks here in the East. That'll be a week from Monday, June 1st. And in the meantime, hopefully I will get all of my garden in now that the danger of first frost has passed. So, doesn't look like we have any questions this morning, so I will sign off with a thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for letting me share these experiences and this music and all the rest of it with you, and I hope you have a great holiday weekend. Thanks again, friends. Take care, be well, be safe, be kind.